Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.
Oh, it's a grim weather day today. No doubt about that. A rainy walk. I shall have to try and find my rainy song that I sort of keep in reserve for these walks that I fortunately have not had to use of late. But we've escaped quite a few rainy walks, and the Photowalk retreat last week was particularly kind when I think about the weather. So I was, at some stage, due a dousing of rain. Let's do a rain quiz, shall we? Yes, Neil, let's do a rain quiz. You have 10 arbitrary seconds, Neil, to come up with as many songs about rain as possible. Go. I should have written these down. Fire and Rain, James Taylor. Eurythmics, Here Comes the Rain. Travis, Why Does It Always Rain on Me? It's Raining Men, Weather Girls. Rainy Night in Georgia by... that must be the 10-second buzzer. Beep, beep, beep. 4 points, Neil. One less than Susan on the other line. Oh, story of my life. So we were actually very lucky last week. So I don't mind being a bit soggy today. I was actually going to make this Barney Dog's first photo walk, since I'd found a few places we could go to without him returning like a brown soggy mop. You got to start him young, haven't you? I was actually going to buy him a GoPro. Don't think I'm sad for this, but I was actually going to buy him a GoPro harness so he could properly get involved with the picture making, but I thought you might think that's a tad daft. Anyway, too wet today, so he's had to wait at home, and he's not very happy. He'll no doubt mount a protest, which usually involves stealing socks, but I've just noticed a new habit. Started only a couple of days ago, where he's now eating the mail. That excuse that we used to have at school, "The dog ate my homework, sir." James, you don't have a dog. Is actually very true now. I can't pay my tax. The dog ate the letter for the HMRC. Oh, okay, heard that one before. So it's just you and I, as per normal. But there's nothing normal at all about my guest today. He is quite literally out of this world with the pictures that he makes of the skies above us, reaching out far into the galaxy. His name is John Carmichael, and I've mentioned him before, and this will not be the only time you hear him as a guest, since our planned 45 minutes conversation became a near on 2-hour discussion about everything from the importance of teachers when you were young to an incredible picture of a total solar eclipse, being in the moon's shadow to make a picture that's lauded as one of the finest of its kind, to mental health, to imposter syndrome, to a chance meeting with Sir Elton John, the biggest private collector of photography in the world. That's a happenstance you wouldn't mind happening upon you. We can't cover everything today, so I'm going to concentrate on that eclipse photograph, because the way it was made, the happenstance, the disappointments. Can you hear that rain? Yes, Neil. Don't get the microphone too soggy, I'll do my best. The happenstance, the disappointments, the fact it almost didn't come to pass despite years and years of hoping and planning. It's a story that shouts never, ever give up on your dreams. And maybe we'll use that as the title for today's show. And John will share a quote from the Dalai Lama that occurred to him while all this was happening, while we were having our conversation. And honestly, it's one of those quotes that, well, if you haven't heard it before, I think, like me, it may not change your life, but today you'll hear a quote that will, I promise, remain with you from this day forward. So John Carmichael then talking about a photograph that has even NASA reaching out to talk to him about the story behind it. And I know you're going to simply love the passion that John has. There were moments during the interview today where I thought, I'll just sit and listen, really, because it was just a wonderful story. And the passion, I feel awkward about using this not passion necessarily, but this particular word these days. His passion is infectious. Another word I usually feel uncomfortable about is awesome, isn't it? You know me, a word that's been hijacked by TikTokers to describe their smashed avocado lunches. But today, talking about the sun and the moon's shadow and the galaxy. Now, well, the word awesome is officially allowed as John Carmichael attempts to make a picture that he's been planning since he was still in school.
Today on the Photowalk.
I think the best photographs come from an innate desire to create something that you feel that has nothing to do with commercializing it, has nothing to do with trying to get the most likes on social media. Like, the best photographs are the genuine photographs that your goal isn't for people to see it.
Stories of life told by photographers, and today more of your stories about what photography means to you, why you make pictures, what you make them about, how your camera helps you to see the world. And we're seeing the world from 39,000 feet today, and the moon shadow, with a little help from my very special guest, John Carmichael, as you heard. It's a very different type of photography show, made out in the wilds, on a walk, me with my camera, you with yours, earbuds in, and a mailbag of letters, plus of course former guests with snippets of inspiration. I'll tell you about today's letter topics in a moment. First though, I'm tipping my hat in full appreciation to my friends at mpb.com, who are very precious to this show. They are the #1 platform in the UK, the US and Europe, with bases in Brighton and Brooklyn and Berlin when it comes to buying, trading or selling quality used kit online. They help photographers like you and like me to tell our unique stories by giving us a safe place to buy and trade and sell the kit that we need. And in doing so, we also become part of the sustainable circular economy. A picture at a moment can change the way we feel. It can change the way we, well, literally view the world. And that's an appropriate subject today. It can even provoke and change history. So, sell the kit you're not using. Trade it in for the kit you need to create. Buy used, spend less, and get more. Go to mpb.com. And to the patrons of this show, a big hearty thank you. And I'll tell you more about those who support us later on. And plus we'll hear from one of our patrons when it comes to those inspirational clips we play between your letters. Right then, today our guest is John Carmichael, split into 2 parts, between which, as we walk, I'll introduce you to the concept of nimbalocity. Yeah, leotards out, we'll try it together. Cycling picture archives, an 80-year-old mirrorless. It's not new, you know, mirrorless. Advice for your younger photographic self. News about the next Photowalk retreat. Did you say the next Photowalk retreat, Neil? Yes, I did. You'll need to be weather hardy though, because it may include a swim. Today's rain is getting me in practice for that. I ask if working to deadlines is really as bad as the press it now receives. Good people of Grassington, well, I have an apology to make following last week's show, plus words of inspiration from Nils Armelinks and Jim Mortram. Remember, you can see the pictures and features we talk about because there is a show page linked to through your podcast player app, which has a plethora of things for you to view and follow after the show, including, and I mention this because the pictures came in after the walk, some stunning eclipse photos in deference to our guest John Carmichael, from one of our patrons, who will get at least 1 or 2 mentions for her work on these shows at the moment, Lynn Fraser, who I'm making honorary captain in charge of great ideas and inspiration, a sign which will probably have a problem fitting onto your office door. So I think we should take this walk then. A few extras on the checklist today. Garibaldi's packed? Check. Brand new, we'll tell you more about it later. Photography Daily merch flask? Check. Boots on and laced? Check. Warm and waterproof hiking trousers today? Check. Spare batteries? Check. Film and cards? Check. Earbuds in? Check. Lens caps off. Let's walk.
I need to find some tree cover. Well, I've come to woodland. You know I love my woodland photo walks, but it seemed entirely necessary today because at least I could find some sort of canopy cover. I spent last week with very talented photo walkers on the Photowalk retreat. If you have not heard the episode, then it's last week's episode. You can kind of join us through parts of the week with that show. One of the photo walkers was Alan Beach. Alan Beach on the beach, as I say. I know it's annoying, Alan. I'll try not to use it so much because he doesn't just spend time at the beach. He makes these glorious, extraordinary pictures all over the country, in woodland and on hills and all sorts of places. But I just know today, if I were with him, he'd be looking a bit glum. This is not your kind of weather, is it, Alan? No, it's not, Neil. So I'll do my best and bring back a photograph that hopefully sings. I'm not quite sure it'll sing in terms of contrast. God, listen to that wind get up as well. Neil, you do know there's a storm on the way. Perhaps being in the middle of woodland isn't your finest idea. I don't know, what do I do? I'm sort of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, as my mum and dad said. I'll make a photo soon. I have to say, I'm being cautious about when the camera comes out. It's downpouring at the moment. Right, your letters. Thank you very much for them all, as always. And we'll start out with Jim Cusman. Stand by, Jim is about to impart with some flattery. And you know that makes my Englishy flinch just a little bit more flinching. It's sort of flattery makes me hide behind the sofa, as you know. And I know it's not false modesty and all that sort of stuff. It's ingrained from my childhood. Hello, Neil. Greetings from Ohio. I'm a lifelong photographer, having started as a 7 or 8 year old borrowing my mother's Kodak Instamatic 126 when she wasn't looking. See, Jim? That works very well, doesn't it? Until Mum gets the film developed at the local drugstore. I can hear it now. Jim, what's this? I'm sure I only use the camera now and then. There's 1,000 pictures of Mustangs and Ferraris on there. Where are all the pictures of the dog and the cat? Come downstairs now. And where are all the flash cubes as well? Of course, it could have been the other way around. 1,000 pictures of the dog and cat, and your mum photographs Mustangs and Ferraris. Who knows? Upon graduating high school in 1984, says Jim, I bought my first real camera, a Canon A1, which I still have, followed by a Nikon FM2N in 1992, which I still have also. I shoot a mix of street and cityscape, landscape, reportage, fine art, wildlife, if you can count cats and birds at the backyard feeder as wildlife. It was you taking the cats and dogs pictures then. I photograph for my own enjoyment, says Jim, having taken to heart some advice from a friend many years ago who warned me that sometimes the quickest way to kill one's passion for a hobby is to turn it into a career. Jim Solos, one of our patrons, said that only a few weeks ago. This is where you turn around and say, yeah, Jim, that was the one, he told me. It was Jim Solos, one of our patrons. It was one of those moments that we play in, one of those clips that we play in as inspirational clips. Instead, says Jim, I've made my living in the broadcasting and audio industry. After college, I started to work in radio and television, finally landing in engineering with a particular interest in audio and audio processing. My job involves an equal mix of technical writing, primarily quick start guides and user manuals, and work with our Omnia line of audio processors. See, around about now, some people may be, with no offence meant, usually that's a terrible expression, isn't it? No offence meant, but usually means I'm about to impart with plenty of offence. You know, I don't want to say but. You think, no, just don't say then. But some people may be glazing over slightly because, Jim, you mentioned the words user and manual in the same sentence. And you know how frightened creative people get about the words user and manual. Not the user manual, no. I only want to make pictures, not fly it to the moon. They probably should have a special group for people afraid of user manual, shouldn't they? Well, you probably wouldn't be able to get in, would you? You'd have to join a long queue, waiting behind all the Sony owners. Oh, Neil! No, I didn't mean that. Only joking. Are you, Neil? Are you? Anyway, Jim says, it should come as no surprise then that I enjoy photography daily on multiple levels, not the least of which has nothing whatsoever to do with the content. Oh, I see. The audio is stellar. Clean, well-balanced, nicely processed to ensure intelligibility without sounding over-compressed. The sound of the production is, the quality of the production rather, is equally impressive. Smooth and well-polished. It makes me sound like a coffee, Jim. yet in a very relaxed style. In short, it's easy to listen to regardless of the device or environment. Well done, my friend. Well, it's very kind of you to say, Jim. And yes, I'm flinching a bit. I spoke last week to, who said it? It was Lynn Fraser said that the Photography Daily podcast, he meant this, I'm sure, in a nice way, is often the way that she falls asleep. Anyway, thank you, Jim. Coming from a sound engineer, I am both honoured and touched, but I do need to ask you a very personal question. So oh, blimey, rain straight on me then. Thanks very much, right down my back. You're welcome. This is just for Jim, this question. Could you close your ears for a second, my other listener, or crunch really loudly on a Garibaldi so you can't hear what I'm asking, Jim? Coast clear? Yes, go on, Neil, you're safe. Jim, the Omnia 9, the broadcast processor thing with all the flashy lights, do any of those ever sort of fall off the shelf at all into your camera bag? Oopsie, one more just falling into my camera bag. That one I must send on to Neil. Because if they do, I'll send you my address. Right, you can stop crunching the Garibaldi now. I've had my private conversation with Jim. In terms of photography, says Jim, the topics, the interviews, the photo walks all deliver on so many levels of their own. They're informative and inspirational, to be sure, but for lack of a better word, it's the humanness that resonates with me, the sensitivity and the focus on mental and emotional well-being. And I'm really pleased you've noticed that, because that's something that's so precious to me, particularly with this podcast, and particularly over the last couple of years, of course. But before I forget, you were asking about guests, suggestions for the interview part of the show. Yes, I'm always intrigued to hear who you have. I have 2 suggestions, says Jim. The first is a photographer in California called Derek Story. There's a good name for a photographer. Mr. Story, he does a weekly podcast called The Digital Story. Can you see what he's done there? Yes. Clever. With a corresponding website at thedigitalstory.com, which offers a nicely balanced look at both technical and artistic topics. I discovered Derek through the companion site, The Nimble Photographer. That sort of is creating all sorts of pictures in my mind. The Nimble Photographer. It's like sort of the yoga of photography. Can you take this picture in the downward dog position? I think you mentioned that last week, Neil. Do you only know one yoga position? Well, is Lotus one? So the Nimble Photographer, which is based on a philosophy of what he calls nimbleosity. That's a made-up word. What is nimbleosity? It's the concept of embracing light and compact cameras and lenses so that our gear never becomes a burden. Oh, makes sense to me. I've taken several of his workshops, says Jim. He's a great guy, and I think the whole travel light philosophy might just resonate with your audience. I suspect you are probably correct there. The second suggestion, although officially this is probably the third, is Henry Diltz, Diltz. As a music lover and broadcaster, you may already be familiar with Henry, but in case you're not, he's responsible for some of the most iconic album cover photographs ever made in the 70s, including Crosby, Stills and Nash, Neil Young, The Doors, The Eagles, Joni Mitchell. Stop the list now. I'm impressed enough. I did go and have, I did need to, I had heard the name, you're right, but I did need to go and reacquaint myself with his work. And yes, on all counts. They are in my file, Jim, but not as we know it. Sorry, couldn't resist a Star Trek moment. I think the rain brings a silliness out in you, doesn't it? Stand in the middle of a woods with rain, with people walking past thinking, what on... You know, the dog walkers that have brought their dogs out, because they're not like Barney, who might turn his nose up, they're all looking across thinking, what are you doing? It does bring the silliness out in you. But yes, the answer is yes. They are in the important file, which is a very real file, and not one of those files people talk about where usually the file means, well, you know what I mean. So yeah, thank you very much for all those. Thank you for your very flattering mail as well, and I'm glad you've joined us. And if that Omnia, well, you know what I'm saying. So some inspiration, where to go? Well, I mentioned Jim Solos. You're called Jim. Does everybody have to be called Jim today? I think, Jim, I'd like you to meet yet another Jim, but this time Jim Mortram, with one of my favourite clips from my interview with him quite some time back, where he talks about the very essence of what photography means to him and how photography actually works, I suppose, for him. Mentally, that is. Jim Mortram.
In life, you're always, one supposes, searching for that thing that's your thing, right? I mean, I'd been to art school, I'd painted, I loved it. A lot of ego involved in that. I played in bands for a long time, made music, a lot of ego involved in that. Photography, I love principally for the instructions are so simple with a traditional camera, okay? The lens points one way, you're the other side of that lens, and it's pointing out from you. It's one of the rare art forms, if it is an art form, that has that kind of built-in instruction to it where you're shooting out. It's out from the self. And that's really, really important to me. Sometimes we can all get trapped in introspection and everything's always about us. And the thing that I love about photography is it gives me the opportunity to do the opposite of that. You know, I'm always looking out. I'm looking out at other people.
Jim Mortram, and I shall link to his episode and of course his work. Right, really I should be making, it's a photo walk, you and I together, I should be making a photo, but I am a little uninspired because of it's just damp. I mean, all the vegetation here is just on the floor for the day. We're not coming up today, but I have got a stump ahead of me. Now, really, I'd like that to be in a pool of light. I'm sort of walking around it thinking, if I step to my right or left, does it make any difference? I don't think I'm going to have an awful lot to show on the show page today, if I were brutally honest with you. But I'm going to try and, let me see if I might need to get closer to it, actually. I have to say that even the colours, I usually love the greens in the rain. It's an absolute joy. Let's see if I can, that might be my get out of jail card here. I'm using I know I've got my fancy new microphone set up, but I thought I'd travel very light today. I've come out with my iPhone 8 with my special setup, my dead cat on the top, just in case you're wondering. For the audio files, since we started off that way, let's put you in my top pocket so I can still talk to you while I'm making this picture. Right, it's the X100V today. I did say travelling light, so much so I've taken the strap off so that I can actually put the camera in my pocket. It's raining that much. So we are certainly not going to need a neutral density filter, not today. Shooting fairly shallow, f3.2, maybe 3.6, and I always underexpose, but if I underexpose too much, I'm in danger of making the colours much harder to pop, I think, in post-processing. We'll see. Shutter speed 100, 3.6, ISO 640. That shows you how dark the day is, because it's nothing to do with ND filters. Right, here we go. One more. Okay, rescue you from the pocket. I'm not sure about it. I mean, it's got some nice green moss, but we'll see. It's a favourite of your parents, wasn't it? We'll see. Can we go to the ice cream parlour? We'll see. Can I go to the playground? We'll see. Can I do my homework? Definitely. Up you go.
On a rainy day, on a rainy day, on a rainy day, on a rainy day,
So let's do some quick firers, shall we? A reminder to send in your stories and your pictures at this point, no matter how small or large, or indeed medium. You don't always have to send pictures, though. If you do, it's fantastic. Send them in 2,000 pixels wide. I did make a mistake last week of mentioning DPI. And you should have seen what happened in the private Facebook group. I think we'll come back to that because it's a good technical thing. This sort of, in the UK at least, we had for many years, have you been missold PPI? Though those that live in this country will know that sort of that scandal, but I instantly got some have you been missold DPI comments. The DPI that you should set when you're preparing your pictures for online use. It's quite an important subject, actually. I think we'll come back to it next week, perhaps. Really, Neil? Mark me up to be out that week. No, honestly, it's changed the way I think about a few things. You certainly need to get out more, Neil, I know. So, so send them in 2,000 pixels on the wide side, and they can be colour, black and white, they can be portrait orientated, they can be landscape, square, whatever. And of course your emails, your letters, as I like to call them, my more analogue spirit, then send those in, what you've been up to, what you've seen, any projects that you're working on. I mean, it's really wide, the topics that you can talk about, and know that you probably are helping somebody who may just be thinking about the same kind of thing that you're writing about. So here's a letter from Ewan McNeil following a recent Photowalk podcast, says Ewan. By the way, if you hear these occasional pips, that's the water falling on the letters, which are gradually getting more and more soggy. Following a recent Photowalk podcast, I thought you might be interested in this archive of cycling photography. And it's certainly been something we've talked about of late, isn't it? Instagram.com/RSF archive, or simply just look up RSF archive on Instagram. I'll pop the link onto the show page today anyway. Absolutely adore the feed. Love. I mean, it's there's a certain amount of humour about this Instagram feed. There really is. The picture of the, let's just say, more mature couple trying to get a push bike out through knee-high, deep mud in what looks like a farmer's field. That for me was what cycling days out on holiday with Mum and Dad was all about. John and Wendy. Wendy, catch up. John, I'm stuck in the mud. Wendy, keep up. John, I'm stuck in the mud. The RSF, says Ewan, is the oldest off-road cycle club founded in the 1950s, and they're slowly digitising an enormous archive of 35mm slides from the club's inception onwards. They've made 2 or 3 books of these so far, along with the ones that they're putting up right now on Instagram. It's great getting people into slides. I know this is not necessarily about getting people into slides, they're archiving from the slides, but my youngest, did I tell you this? Maybe a month or so ago, we went to a heritage railway, and he went into one of the small shops that they had, and there was a man in there that had collected slides and all sorts of 35mm stuff, and Thomas had never seen this kind of stuff before, and he was so wide-eyed as he was looking through it, particularly the slides. What's this magic, Dad? Wonderful. Holding them up against the window. Fantastic. Books are available too, and I'm going to add those, the cycling books that is, to the show page today. I've also attached, says Ewan, a recent picture of my 10-year-old. Both kids love going out on the bike, but this one was just me and my son off in the ice, mist and frost while his sister was away at Brownlee Camp a couple of weeks ago, taken on an X100F. That is son and dad bonding in one picture. So I'll put that on the show page today. Thanks very much for your tip-off on that Instagram as well. Fantastic. Some super images, quite funny ones too. Here's one from Camille, a recent new patron, which is nice. I love your newest Insta account, by the way, Camille, which I will link to today. I wonder while I wander. Good, tongue twister. I wonder while I wander. It's called, the description simply says, it's called Walk, Click and Repeat. And it was one of those, now why didn't I think of that as a description moment? Hello, Neil, says Camille. Here's a smartphone picture that excites me. And I'll put that picture he's talking about here on the show page as well. My new Zeiss Icon Iconta 66 Type 52116. That's almost a bit technical for me. And a roll of film. An 80-year-old mirrorless that's going to make me make pictures from shooting to developing. See, short and sweet from Camille, but I sense your joy in picking up this wonderful camera, which must have, I mean, it's 80 years old. If a camera could tell stories, so enjoy using it. I love, well, I'm looking forward to seeing some pictures that you make with it, Camille. I hope you'll share some with us. And then finally, Craig Wilson, love your pictures of the Lake District, Craig. A beautiful set of pictures. A lot of serenity and calm. I am aware I use that word, serenity, a lot, and I know that when I look through Instagram and comment on the work that I see, you'll often find me putting, what a serene image, or this is a picture about serenity. It's almost a mantra of mine, for which I make no apologies, because that's how it makes me feel. But Craig, beautiful, really, those Lake District pictures, beautiful. I'll share, of course, your Instagram. Craig says, can I just say what a pleasure it was to hear Charlie Waite on the show. I love his enthusiasm for landscape photography. I can listen to that man all day long. Me too. So I've set myself a challenge to take more landscape photos, and here are some photos from my last landscape photo walk around the Lake District, the ones I was eulogising about just a moment ago. One of the best days with a camera I've had in a while. Isn't that nice when you have one of those days with a camera and you think, oh, I'll remember this day for a while to come. All the best, Craig from Sunderland land. Well, I'll pop Craig's pictures on the show page today so that you can see them as well. Right, we've had some quick fire letters into the show, so let's have a quick fire inspirational bit from a patron of the show. This is the King of Street in Denmark land. Oh, I know who you're going to say, Neil, I know. Dennis Skyam, I knew it. And I'm in danger of my introduction to this inspirational bit being longer than the bit itself. But I asked Dennis, it's a question I've asked a few patrons, and you'll hear this pop up actually over the coming months. I asked Dennis if he could go back in time and give his younger version some advice on the day that he started making pictures, what would that advice be?
Stop obsessing over quality. It doesn't matter if there's noise in it. It doesn't matter if it's like not super tech sharp. If the photo evokes an emotion, it's a good photo.
Fantastic. Ooh. Shall I edit that bit out or leave it in? I was just about to say, fantastic to hear from Dennis Skyam, and then my foot went down a huge pothole. Leave it in, Neil. Go on. Warts and all. Okay. Hope it doesn't sound too odd. So this photo walk show relies upon you to send the pictures that you make on your own walks and the messages and stories you send in, which can be anything loosely to do with photography and art and filmmaking. So as I said before, keep sending your pictures in and your stories. And actually, for some of the best ones, well, they're all best. Hang on, that was really clumsy of me. Rewind. For some of those that have particular edges or stories about them, that might be better. I have something to announce a little bit further on in the show today. So send them in to, I don't think I remember to give you the email address just a moment ago, which was a real schoolboy error, but I am being rained upon. You might not be able to hear it, but I am, honestly. Send them to studio@photographydaily.show. studio@photographydaily.show. Good. I have some more news, new news about the next Photo Walk retreat coming up soon today as well. Hang about, Neil. Haven't you just had one of those? Well, yes, but we loved it so much. And I had a ball. Certainly enjoyed it. It was wonderful spending time with our friends Anna and Alan and Paul and Lynn and Andrea and you, because you were the other member, weren't you, in the show itself? So I think I was literally discussing it with Lynn Fraser, who has a wonderful place very close. I think it's about 7 or 8 miles outside Inverness. And I thought, well, we've gone far south, let's go far north. So anyway, new news to come up later on. Don't give the game away, Neil. You're doing that classic spoiler thing that you always do. Okay, all right. Point made. Shush. I've had a number of conversations of late where we've talked about deadlines being a good driver for many photographers if they're working on a project. Hang about, I need to take a picture. Neil, you're digressing at the wrong moment. I know. I just love the water falling on these plants. I wish I could tell you what they are. My guide would get soggy if I pulled it out. I don't even think I brought it today. But I just love the water on the leaves. Let's see if we can... It's not so macro really, but let's see what we can get out of this X100V. See if we can show the moisture on these leaves. It's wonderful. Makes them very lush. Hold on. Put you in my pocket so we can make the picture. So, nice and close. It's definitely... oh! Hear that? The wind as well. Okay, look, I'm trying to take a close-up picture. Do me a favour, don't move around so much. Thanks very much. Behave. Shutter speed 100, 3.6. 1000 ISO. It's getting darker. And here we go, I'm going to get a couple. I just want to show the lush greens in this rain. As I say, my sketchbook images today, I'm not sure they're going to be a lot to write home about. But, well, they are a record, aren't they? Of a walk in the rain. Let's rescue you from the pocket. Right. Yes, a number of conversations of late about deadlines being a good driver for many photographers if they're working on a project. I think I'm personally set up for deadlines. It's probably the hangover of working in newspapers in the occasional radio newsroom and documentaries, and this, to be fair, as well. I mean, this is a deadline every single week. But I tell you what, go online, and you'll find these days you'll find a raft of information about why deadlines are practically the work of the devil. There's not one positive thing to be found. I remember deadlines being lauded in some newsrooms as that kind of thing. Makes your work have an edge. I think that was the expression used. But so you really have to search high and low for anything that's even mildly positive about the word deadline. I got this. This is a good example from a New York Times article from 2013. People respond well to deadlines because meeting them provides a distinct feeling of having achieved something within a time frame. It's a good way to keep score, Professor Airily said, who is apparently an expert on deadlines. Professor of deadlines, how about that? There's something to put on your office door. A mere announcement on Twitter would hardly be enough for die-hard procrastinators. Hang on, was Twitter around? Yes, it was around in 2013. The years aren't moving that quickly. If you're one of them, consider creating a situation that has real consequences, says the prof. Give a friend $100 and say, if I don't meet my deadline, you can keep this. Or he said, try the prospect of public humiliation. Make a bet with your friends. If I don't meet the deadline, I'm going to run through the streets naked. That kind of thing. I'm seeing another side to the prof. No, it's true, isn't it? If you make a statement, as long as you keep to them, as long as you honour them, they're certainly a way you can work with deadlines. I'd be interested to hear. I know you might be thinking, well, I don't work as a professional photographer, Neil, so it's not really my. It's not something I have to worry about. But we all have deadlines in our life, and actually, those who aren't necessarily turning a buck or a pound or a euro, still with photographic projects, still give themselves deadlines. I know I've got several friends that are doing it. So if you work well with deadlines, or you don't work well with deadlines, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about them. It's something that deadlines are very much associated with the creative industry, aren't they? I mean, last week I gave myself quite the deadline. We were at the photographic retreat. We had one of our wonderful evening chats. Just looking, I think we were in the library and having a something and nothing conversation, sometimes photographic, sometimes life. And I knew that as everybody departed to head to Bedfordshire, as my dad used to say, I'm just heading to Bedfordshire for the night. Then I knew that my evening had sort of just started. We had to get the royal me. I had to edit the podcast and make sure that it was uploaded and out to the world that night. And I eventually went to bed at about 2:30 in the morning. Now, I've done that in my life before, so I am no hero. I know plenty of people work to that time in the morning when they're not quite expecting to, but my Antipodean friends particularly enjoyed it. Oh, we got the podcast earlier than expected. That's why. So deadlines. Yes, I'd like to hear from you. studio@photographydaily.show. Anyway, I'm slightly digressing. The whole point of talking to you about deadlines was about today's story. My chat with my guest is a real working example of, well, really being up against everything, and time being one of those facets, to capture a picture that the photographer, in this case my guest John Carmichael, had been planning in some way, shape or fashion since he was a lad. It is it's the photo of his life, really. And everything is stacking up to prevent it from happening at all, as you're about to hear. Today is the story of, well, it's the story of John Carmichael, who you're going to hear more of over the coming months. But this particular episode today, this is the story of just one picture.
Astronomy photographer, John. That's your title, and it's one that you owe to a very, very special person, actually. I think it's fair to say that teachers are a very special breed, and you were very lucky to meet somebody who stoked your enthusiasm so much for the miracle that is space very early on in your life, didn't you?
Yes. Are you referring to my geography teacher?
Yes, I am.
Oh, wow. You do your due diligence. You do your research. Yes, Mrs. Thompson.
Yeah.
Yeah, she inspired me when I was in 7th grade, and little did I know how much she would affect my life decades later. Yeah.
Have you spoken to Mrs. Thompson of late?
I have not. I have to dig up my old yearbooks and find out her first name and try to hunt her down, because I would love to thank her.
What did she say that made that much difference to your life?
So it wasn't necessarily what inspired me to get into astronomy. I had always loved space and astronomy since before I could remember. I used to build and launch model rockets as a kid growing up, and built dozens of them. One of them was 6 feet tall and flew 2,000 feet up in the air. But she is the one that taught me what a total solar eclipse was.
Yeah.
And she turned out all of the lights in the classroom. She got out a globe. She had one of the students hold a flashlight across the room representing the sun. And she got out a baseball representing the moon and started orbiting the baseball around the globe, showing us what the moon's phases are. Here's a quarter moon and a new moon and a full moon. She said, every once in a while, though, the moon will perfectly align in between the sun and the earth, creating what's called a total solar eclipse. And it's very rare, but if you're lucky enough and in the right place at the right time, you can be inside that moon's shadow. And from Earth, you would see the entire sky in the middle of the daytime suddenly turn completely dark, like it's midnight, within seconds. And she showed us photos and everything of it. And I was so shocked that I had never heard of this before. I'm like, what? This exists? How have I never heard of this? I ran home from school that day and I said, Mom and Dad, have you ever seen a total solar eclipse before? And no, I don't think so. I'm like, you've never been to totality? And my dad's like, what's totality? And I'm like, what? How could you live your whole life never seeing one of these? And so since that day, I was determined. I'm like, I'm not going to be one of those adults that's never seen one of these. And so, I knew of the Great American Eclipse, which it started being called, coming up. Well, it wasn't coming up. It was 2 decades away, but I knew of it August 21st, 2017 for many years since then. And little did I know I would eventually become a photographer. And then I would end up documenting this eclipse that I was, thinking for many years. What do I do? Where do I go for this once in a lifetime moment? Because this was the first total solar eclipse that swept across the US in 99 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, the reason your mother and father would not have seen it is it's a once every almost 100-year thing, isn't it? So.
Yeah, I mean, well, especially in a specific spot. I mean, that's very rare. And so you really have to go out of your way and travel, most likely internationally, to see one in your lifetime. So yeah, it is a pretty big deal. And the moon's shadow is, only 60 miles wide. And I do encourage anybody listening to go out of your way to go to a total solar eclipse, not 99% totality, go to 100% totality. It's literally 10,000 times brighter at 99% than 100%. It's a night and day difference. And you can take your eclipse glasses off when you're in totality and look at the sun with your naked eye. You could stare at it and see the sun's corona, the atmosphere of the sun. You can see prominences shooting out, solar flares. Wow. Ask anybody that's seen one. It brings you to tears. And it's quite remarkable.
I have this, and listeners will know this sort of comedic ban on certain words. And one of those words that I've banned, particularly my children from using, is the word awesome. Because it's such an overused word for describing blueberry muffins on Instagram. Blueberry muffins may not be awesome, but a totality moment isn't it?
That is what the word awesome is supposed to mean, right? Yes. It is truly awesome. It is. You are completely awestruck by it. Yeah. And what's so great about it is it's so uniting. It's so, when this happened in 2017, our country was quite divided, and still is. It's very polarized right now. And this moment in time was, for one day, everybody just paused, and every news network you can think of, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, literally everyone was covering this positive, uniting story, and everybody just tens of millions of people came together and looked up, and everybody for a brief moment in time became an astronomer is kind of how I like to think of it. Well, that's what astronomy does.
I've heard you say that. You believe there's an astronomer in every single one of us. Made harder, you did comment, by the fact that the world is so different now, that light pollution makes it difficult to actually experience the stars in the way that once we did.
Yeah, I mean, you think about our ancestors. For thousands of generations, our ancestors would look up at the stars and wonder, what is this? Who are we? What are we? Why are we here? I mean, they were obsessed over this. Light pollution is a new issue. We're the first real generations to not see that amazing Milky Way galaxy every single night of our lives. You really have to go out of your way to actually see the Milky Way. You have to be, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, like you and I are, you can only really see the center of the Milky Way in the summer. And you can only see it when there's no moon out. There has to be clear skies. Even the humidity takes a role.
To be in that club of photographers who made one of history's most amazing photos, close quote, is not a bad place to be, is it? I mean, let's talk about that moment and that picture, how you captured this photograph of a total solar eclipse. It's a very celebrated picture for very good reason.
All of the quotes and things that people have said about it, I don't want to say I don't believe that, but it's like the imposter syndrome, which I know you've talked about in some of your other episodes. And I've become a huge fan of your podcast, by the way. I've learned a lot about other photographers. And anyway, I just wanted to
we're a small podcast star in a big podcast universe.
Yeah, well, and it's so great. And the way that you are just so real and transparent and talk about struggles and talk about, what other photographers go through, because photography can be a very isolating experience.
I do want to come back to the mental health thing, because that is very important, actually, and I know it's important to you as well. But this picture that you made of this total solar eclipse, and I can see you, like I do when I receive any form of flattery, squirming slightly uncomfortably when it's given all these titles. But it has, and you chose. I mean, it's a beautiful story, and I've watched you talk about it on various films, actually, and I've read some articles, and you've spoken about it on various news channels. So it's a well-documented story, but there's always people that haven't necessarily heard it. But I love it because the picture looks like you were gifted a NASA space rocket sent up to make a picture, and that's another story that we can come to. But you weren't. You were on a commercial airliner. You'd even taken cheekily $600 to put in the palms of the hand of a passenger who might be sitting in the window that you want to be sitting in to get this photograph. But I'll let you take it up from there, because it's a fantastic story how you got this image. When I make a picture out of an airline window, it's an utter disaster. But you have turned it into a work of art, John.
Thank you. Most of my photos out of airplane windows are a disaster as well. So, what's really funny about this is I never gave the story itself behind the image a second thought. In my mind, I had been envisioning this for pretty much since I was 12 years old, from seventh grade geography class, right? And now, years later, I become a photographer, totally unintentionally. I was never planning on becoming a photographer. I just accidentally fell in love with it. Yeah. For this, there were a number of things that came together on how I even came up with this idea. And I actually have a pilot's license, not commercially, just sport pilot. I like to fly for fun. Flying has just been my number one joy, my passion since forever. Like I said earlier, I used to launch model rockets as a kid. My favorite rocket was called the Astrocam because it had a little camera on the nose cone, and it would launch up and it would take photos at its peak height of the Earth on its way down.
Fantastic.
And this is back in the 90s before digital photography, right? So I always remember being so anxious and excited to get it developed. And there were seeds being planted throughout my childhood that I wasn't aware of. So with flying and that Astrocam, and I love every flight I go on, I always get a window seat. I don't understand people that get an aisle seats. So this was really an embodiment of so many of my passions all merged together. And I got the idea several years before the eclipse. I kept wondering, because this also became the most photographed moment in history, this specific eclipse. So as a photographer, where do you go? What do you do for one of the most photographed moments in history? I think the best photographs come from an innate desire to create something that you feel that has nothing to do with commercializing it, has nothing to do with trying to get the most likes on social media. Like the best photographs are the genuine photographs that your goal isn't for people to see it. Because of that, I had this idea. I remember it so vividly, and I kept wondering for the eclipse, where do I go? What do I do? And I wondered if I could get up high enough in the air, could I actually see the shape of the moon shadow moving across the Earth's surface? So
the moon shadow is a strip, isn't it? That moves, and that's the totality. That's right. The darkness.
It is a circle, though. It's a circle, or more of an oval.
Okay.
So it actually is the shape of the moon being cast on the Earth. Oh, right. But the reason why, when you look at maps of total solar eclipses, it looks like a streak, that's the path of the circle. Oh. So that's part of the reason that this was such a difficult task to accomplish, because the moon shadow is only about 60 miles wide. It varies based on the eclipses and whatnot, but it's roughly about 60 miles wide, and it moves at 2,000 miles per hour. So to intersect an airplane into this 2,000 mile an hour moving shadow while the plane is moving at 500 miles per hour, it's I was pulling my hair out. And so I kept, I was looking up private jet companies and literally getting quotes for like $40,000. And I'm thinking, I don't have that kind of money to spend on this. That's kind of ridiculous. About 6 months before the eclipse, Alaska Airlines did this big announcement on social media that they have an entire aircraft of theirs that is fully reserved for astrophysicists and astronomers and eclipse chasers. They are going to charter one of their aircraft to be inside the moon shadow totality over the Pacific Ocean, 1,000 miles west of Oregon. And they're keeping one seat open for a lucky winner to be on this flight. All you have to do is submit a 30-second video explaining why you should be the one on this seat. And I'm like, I am freaking out. I am like, oh my God, this is it. This is going to save me $40,000. This is like meant to be, I can't believe this. Yeah. And so I worked so hard on this 30-second video. I hired an animator for it. I composed music to try to edit it to flow with the video. I bought a nice microphone for voiceover. I mean, it was literally a commercial. But the problem is they didn't actually announce the winner for this contest until about a week or less before the eclipse. And all my eggs are in this one basket. And I was looking at all the other submissions being sent in, and my confidence started building because most of the other videos being sent in were just people talking on a webcam, no editing, very little effort. Most people were going way over the 30-second limit. So I assumed they would be disqualified. And so I thought, I have a very good chance of this. And they finally announced the winner and I lost. I lost. And I'm like, I'm so devastated.
With a week to go.
Now I have a week left before the eclipse, which I've been thinking about for literally 20 years. And I live in Manhattan, so I'm nowhere near the moon's path. The moon's path is kind of going through the central part of the U.S. from west to east. And I started thinking, you know what? I'm going to look at all the commercial flights around the country. And, I got my friends involved, and I'm looking at all these commercial flights for the day of the eclipse. And, I'm pulling my hair out. I'm trying to look at, okay, if this flight's leaving this city at this time and it flies at roughly 500 miles per hour cruising speed, it should hit the moon shadow around this time. And I'm like, if any flight is like 2 minutes delayed, it's over, Yeah. I'm just like, there's no way this is going to work out. And right before giving up, I found one flight. My friend Justin, actually, he was talking to Southwest Airlines, and we found this one flight leaving from Portland, Oregon to St. Louis, Missouri, about an hour before the eclipse started. And the flight path itself matched the moon shadow path. So there was no intersection. The flight path was the moon's path.
Oh my word.
And there was one seat left. There's one seat left, when you're booking and it's like one seat left, and I booked the flight without even thinking twice. Now I have to book another flight from Manhattan to get to Oregon, on this crazy travel day. It wasn't cheap, but I didn't care. I'm just doing whatever.
It was less than $40,000, let's be honest.
Yeah, anything is cheap now at this point. So I get there the day before, but the biggest thing I'm nervous about, it's Southwest Airlines. And for those that don't know, Southwest doesn't have any assigned seating. You line up based on your group and all that. And it's just every man for himself.
So no wonder you were bringing your $600 then. That was what that was for. That's
exactly, right. I got group C, and I'm like, I'm going to be the last one on the plane. I'm not even going to get a window seat, let alone a window that's up front so that the wing isn't in the way of the shot. It's like all these factors, So that's when, I got all this cash out, and I get to the airport, and, the business, there's no first class on Southwest either. So they do have like a business select, but those were sold out as well. So I'm trying to convince this check-in agent, please, can I get pre-boarding? And it didn't work out. So I get to the gate, and I don't know what the odds of this happening are, but that Alaska Airlines flight, that big contest I wanted to win so badly, happened to be leaving out of the same city, out of the same airport, out of the gate right next to mine. And they're having this huge eclipse party. Literally, there's a red carpet event. There's a step and repeat. There's these famous astrophysicists there. And I turn around and I look at my gate, and it says that our flight is 25 minutes delayed. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me.
After all
of all flights, to be delayed. And so now I'm pacing back and forth. Now I'm trying to mingle and rub elbows with all these Alaska Airlines people, like to see if there's an empty seat. I'll pay whatever, to get on it. But no, it was full. So they're all celebrating getting on their plane. And I'm starting to think, I need a contingency plan here, because if this flight's this delayed, I'm going to miss it most likely. maybe I should leave the airport, get in an Uber and drive south. I'm literally 10 miles away from Totality in Oregon.
Yeah.
So I'm like, at least I would see the eclipse from the ground.
Yeah.
But right before leaving, finally a check-in agent comes onto the PA system. She says, "Thank you so much for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. There's a reason why we've delayed your flight today. As most of you have heard by now, there's a very historic moment happening in our country. For the first time in 99 years, blah, 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 solar eclipse." And these three gentlemen standing next to me here are three executives from Southwest Corporate that flew out from our headquarters in Dallas to be on our flight with us today. And they brought eclipse glasses with them. And guess what? All the drinks on today's flight are going to be free. They're all solar eclipse themed drinks. So a Bloody Mary is now going to be called a solar flare, and all this. And they're all free in the flight. So we want you to have a great time. And the best part of all is that we actually deliberately delayed our flight so that we will be right inside the moon shadow, which is called Totality. And I'm like, oh, thank God.
And we'll return to John Carmichael very, very soon with part 2 of the story as he tries to board an airliner to try and get that pick. A big shout out, as my kids say, the cool kids used to say, to our patrons, who as we go forward with the show are so important. Without you, and I mean this, there would be no show. Each week to make the Photowalk show, it takes at least 2 days. Writing, production, actually walking, drying your clothes out from the rain, emptying your welly boots out of water, that kind of thing. And, it's my plan to one day bring back more episodes during the week. Thoughts for the day, photo assignments, those sort of goodies. Photo assignments particularly interest me. I think it would be fantastic to have part of the show dedicated to photo assignments. Or I say part of the show, one day of the week. So yes, all those goodies planned. From the price of one high street coffee per month, patrons are therefore really important to helping maintain a future for this podcast. And to thank you, all patrons get to hear the extra more editions, which are a mix of personal photographic diary essays, our what was called Book Club. It's pictures on a page now. And also we've got this new feature called 5 Things I Love About Photography. Now, you heard that last week on the Photowalk show, a kind of a bit of a treat amongst the retreat edition. A treat amongst the retreat. I think that made sense. So yes, that's what we do on a Saturday as well in the More edition. And of course, we meet once a month on Zoom just to talk about each other's photography. And in fact, that's been a growing feature. It's fantastic. It's like a big club of us. Usually the first Tuesday in every month, but it's changed just for the next month and a half, possibly 2 months. While, and you'll like the reason for this, while Barney goes to puppy training classes with me. I should actually just take you along on that. We should have a mobile Zoom meeting with me trying to train the barn while we're sharing photographs. No, not a good idea, Neil. Yes, you're probably right. Do you remember last week we were talking about this phrase I love, which I think I heard from one of my favourite talk show broadcaster, James O'Brien, on a radio station in the UK called LBC. Whether he heard this from somebody else, or it's something that's, a psychological take on human behaviour that's more widely known, I don't know, but I do like it. Footballification. Footballification. Could be a song, a rock song. That thing that happens where you just can't change your mind about anything. You're in the ride or die world of supporting or believing something that you've had ingrained in you since probably birth, where somebody in your family told you that the green football jersey of Grassington United, that's the jersey you have to wear. The message from, I don't know, your siblings, your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, and probably the game didn't go further back than that. But that's footballification. Something that you're introduced to. You don't quite know why you support it, but you support it to your closing breath. And even when Grassington United are awful, you still support them. And you still shout from the terraces that they're the finest when you know, looking at them, this has been a dreadful day at the office. The context, if you're wondering why we were talking about footballification, the context was about brand loyalty, which is, I suppose, particularly strong in some photographic circles, isn't it? But Bob, you're a cannon shooter. How could you possibly swap shirts and play for Olympus? Well, I'm not talking to you anymore. So that was the context of why I mentioned footballification in an otherwise picture literate show about getting in touch with your photographic brain. But because I was worried about mentioning a real name of a football team, because that alone raises is it the Hackles or the Heckles? What is it, Hackles? Hackles, Neil, it's Hackles. Yes, Hackles. On some people's backs, I made a team up. So I didn't go with anybody like Manchester United or Chelsea or Barcelona or Juventus or insert name of football team in your country here. I thought I'd be safe if I went for Grassington United. Once a Grassington United fan, always a Grassington United fan. There we go, safe. Ooh, I thought. So here's a letter from Dominic Sagar that arrived hot on the heels of last week's show, me talking about footballification. He also sent in, by the way, some superb pictures, and I'll link to his stuff online, which I'll include on the show page today. So thank you for your pictures as well, Dominic. But here's the letter. Dear Neil, I've just been listening to show 281, the Photowalk Retreat 2022. See, this is, as they say, hot off the press. Having grown up in the north of England, in Burnley, or should we say Burnleyland, we'd often go to Grassington for a day trip, taking along a picnic and playing in the river. So Grassington exists. I should have looked that up, I know. Also, having played a lot of football as a kid, I was pretty sure, you know, Neil, that Grassington had a football team. I just had to go and look them up. And look what I found. No, this is not possible. Grassington United. And you said they were made up, and here we go. We've got the link for GrassingtonUnitedFootballClub.com/teams. They really do exist. Honestly, when I made up that team, I just looked where I was walking and thought, Grassington United, perfect. Anyway, says Dominic, that aside, what a fantastic show. I've been listening for about a year now and look forward to the photo walk every single Friday. I did my 365 project last year, and I've been taking a bit of a breather so far this year. I've been taking out an old Olympus OM1 and trying out film. Fantastic. I've also picked up a virtually brand new X Pro 1 to use, if that's not an oxymoron, I suppose unused, to use with some vintage lenses. Oh, you'll have a lot of fun doing that. Or play. Should I say playing? I'm not playing, Neil. I'm doing it. Yes, I know, sorry. Using that. Practicing with that. I'm getting myself in a lot of trouble. I just need a diopter, says Dominic, to make it work with my old eyes. When you find one that works, Dominic, would you let me know, because I have the very same problem. I've attached a couple of pictures from my latest photo walk. These days I make my home in Colorado land, USA. These are from Saturday morning walking with my wife and our dog in Keystone, Colorado land. I used your reprobate pal Mullins Padilla recipe on my always handy X100V. P.S. Oh, another word about the sound. The sound quality of the podcast, phenomenal. I'm always amazed how clear and loud things sound in comparison to other podcasts. I literally have to turn the volume down. That's what the photo walkers each said last week. I think it was Anna that said one day they could hear me on the beach. Something like that, before they actually saw me. My kids, well, they desperately like to turn me down, I'm sure. Dad, shh, quiet, volume knob. Ooh, that's better. And, PPS, Neil's armour links. Simply, wow. I know. You're absolutely right, Dominic. Thank you so much for the pictures that you sent in, which I'll share on the show page. And thank you, too, for bringing to my attention Nils. Now, I know we've played Nils a good few weeks in a row, and I make no excuses for playing a few more moments of Nils armour links. His inspirational story from that episode, ooh, that's one that will be strong in my memory, always. Nils, your ears are going to be burning once again, I know. as we play a little bit more inspiration from Niels Armelinks, and I'll be sure, of course, to link to that episode as well.
There's an annual mountain festival here in Kendal, which is a huge gathering of kind of like mountaineers and cyclists.
I know it. I know it. Yeah.
It's a brilliant festival. There's a night which I tend to always go to called the Bike Night, which is one of their biggest events. And there's a chap there called Andy McKenna, who had been diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis, quite a few years prior to that. Yeah. And he created a film called This Way Up, I seem to remember what it's called. And it was all about how, despite his condition, he was still getting out and he was still riding bikes. And the actual film was really quite hard hitting. Like he'd be sort of shaking on his bike and, really finding it difficult to kind of control muscle movement, etc. But he was still smiling and he was still beaming. And this was kind of about 6 months after I started chemotherapy. And initially I thought, when I started, I'm not going to be riding bikes anymore. Not for a while anyway, not until I'm kind of through this chapter. Seeing him talk about his adventures and how he'd kind of documented it, I thought, actually, I shouldn't let this illness dictate how I live my life. Yeah. I should still get out there and do what I love doing. And I really need to kind of find a way that kind of works for me. So initially when I went out, I actually felt like, having always been really fit, I got an insight into what it must be like to be really, really unfit, riding up hills that I'd normally kind of breeze up. I was really struggling and my lungs were burning, my legs were burning. And I thought, crikey, I've bitten off more than I can chew here. But it was remarkable, kind of just building it up gradually, how much fitness I regained, even though I was on kind of like fortnightly chemotherapy cycles. So much so that my friends started to think that, the stuff I was getting in hospital was probably not chemotherapy, but just a really finely tuned doping regime.
The amazing Niels Armelinks. And Niels, as you know, introduced me to the most incredible quote. Well, you'll know if you were listening to the last couple of weeks, because I've waxed lyrical, that is. He said, "I quickly realised I may not be able to add days to my life, but I was determined to add life to the remainder of my days." Oh, glorious. Really wonderful. And there's another amazing quote you're about to learn, courtesy of the second part of my conversation with John Carmichael in a moment. Right, would you like some news? Yes, please, Neil. News. New news. Roll the jingle. Yes, the Photowalk retreat. There is going to be a second one this year. We were, I think, 24 hours toward the end of the first one, and there was a conversation I had with Lynn Fraser, who has this wonderful place in Scotland, which we're able to use for this. Lynn was on the retreat, and so we were talking about a second one, and diaries came out, and we discussed some dates. Public announcements being good for the soul, as that professor said that I mentioned a while ago. Here is a date to mark in your diary. Pencil it right now with one of those softer pencils. Would that be is that a 2B or an HB? 2B or HB? I feel like I'm going Shakespearean on you. But mark it in 5th of September through to the following weekend in the countryside, very close to Inverness land and close to a loch. There's going to be, we've discussed a few ideas. Now the last, it was only a couple of weeks ago, the last retreat had a ball, an absolute, wonderful time, fantastic people, fantastic food, and we made lots of pictures. In fact, there's some of the photo stories that we didn't even realise we were making at the time have subsequently befriended people or joined people together that had no idea they were about to meet photographers. That sounds a bit cryptic, I know, but it was fantastic. It really was. We taught photography. It was a week where you could just be immersed in the beauty of picture making without having to say, "Can I have the day off to go and take some more pictures today? Have you done all your chores?" "No." "Okay, all right, I'll come back a bit later on." So we talked about things that we could do, and one thing will be assignments, spending some time with those who work the land, that kind of thing. Now, we wanted to do that before, but when the last Photowalk retreat was announced, along came Omicron. and spoiled the party on that one, really, because it was very difficult to talk to some people and allow strangers into their buildings to go and make photo stories. But the world is becoming a different place, I know, and we'll be coming out of summer at that time, and keep dreaming, Neil. I know, so pretty sure that's okay this time around. Our library, we'll have the library again. That'll be open for the late night conversations. We manage the midnight hour every single night, I think, with a nightcap. Nudge, nudge. We'll likely do a little street picture making in Inverness. This time we have a retreat plan to do a little more cooking together. And if you can't cook, and I have to put myself in that brigade, if you can't cook very well, fear not. You can be with me and prep the spuds or pour the wine, which is equally as important. And now this is the one I'm saying, partly through gritted teeth and partly with an ironic smile. Well, maybe not ironic smile, maybe just a smile, maybe just a wry smile, maybe just a pained expression. We are in mild discussions about organising a possible only mind, open water swim in the loch, or photographing those brave enough to take the plunge. Mindfulness is part of a retreat after all, and open water swimming is supposed to be very, very good for your mindfulness. I'm all on for the forest bathing, but it seems that loch swimming might be something that you can either do or photograph. Talking of mindful, I'm mindful of what it might make me do noise-wise. So far you're used to my voice being relatively calm, usually, and controlled. Swimming in a loch may just bring out my inner Mickey Mouse I fear. But I can't wait already. But here is the thing, we only have, and this is an absolute locked down, don't say that, locked down, no, Neil, rewind. This is an absolute number, 6. That's all we can have in this particular house. We can't expand into another house. That's the accommodation we have. And actually, to be fair, that's the number that we found worked really, really well last time around. So 6. And here's my Professor. Did I call him O'Reilly? Really? Anyway, the prof statement. If I don't swim in the loch, stand by, Neil. If I don't swim in the, don't say it, Neil. If I don't swim in the loch, I will run. Don't say it, Neil. Nobody needs to see that. Anyways, retreat. More news coming shortly. A chance for 1 week to make and talk about pictures when we want and however we want, and just bathe in photography for the week as a crew. And we'll be making a podcast together as well. So, John Carmichael, this extraordinary story continues. In part 1, John eventually found himself that commercial jet airliner, didn't he? That may be able to make him make the most incredible picture of the great American eclipse. But, and it's a very important consideration, there are a number of factors that are still conspiring against him. So here's part 2 of John Carmichael, the story today of one extraordinary picture. Part 2.
So now I'm just thinking, I still have to get a window seat, right? So I'm like, I should introduce myself to the executives, these 3 executives that are here. But first, I get all my camera gear out of my bags. I have 3 camera bodies on me. I have all these lenses. So I put the lenses on the bodies, and I'm putting them over my shoulders, to show maybe I'm legit.
You look like the real deal, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not shooting with my iPhone.
No.
And I walk up to them. I'm wearing a NASA t-shirt, and I introduce myself. I tell them, my story, and I even showed them my Alaska Airlines video, because that whole red carpet event's happening right across from us, right there. It's only 30 seconds, and it shows some of my photography and stuff. And they said, "Those are your photographs?" And I said, "Yeah." And you were supposed to be on that flight, but you're on ours instead, and you just flew across the country to be on this flight to take photos of this? I said, "Yeah, but I really need a window seat. I'm in Group C." They're like, "Okay, come with us." So I walk with them, and I am the first one on the plane, like pre-boarding. And they introduce me to the entire flight crew. all the flight attendants, but they also introduced me to the captain and the first officer, both pilots. And they said, listen, this guy is really determined. We got to help him out. We got to help him get this shot. So the flight attendants, were like, pick whatever seat you want. So now my next goal is to find the cleanest window. And as you mentioned earlier, it's really hard to get a good, clean, sharp photo out of airplane windows. Also, layers of plastic.
Yeah.
It's not just solid glass.
No, I know. There's several layers, aren't there?
Yeah. It's very hard. So I'm looking through all these different windows. I run back to the front of the plane and I said, you guys, I can't shoot out of any of these windows. The outside of the plane is filthy dirty, and the captain, the pilot overhears me and he said, hold on, why don't you sit on the left side of the plane instead in the front row? Because I think I can get your window clean. So the captain himself gets into the cockpit. He gets these cleaning supplies out. He gets out of the plane using the moving jetway thing, you get on the plane with, and he reaches over and he washes my window from the outside of the plane. I mean, I can't believe it. And it's so funny. And I have photos of all of this, of course. And it's so funny because in that photo of him washing the window, you can see behind his hand is the Alaska flight that I wanted to win so badly. And in that moment, I thought of this quote by the Dalai Lama. I'm a big fan of the Dalai Lama. I highly recommend everybody read some of his autobiographies. Freedom in Exile is great. And he said, remember that sometimes not getting what you want can be a wonderful stroke of luck. Here I was. Yeah. It's good, right? It's good because here I was for 6 months, so determined to get on this flight. And I worked so hard for this. And literally 20 minutes ago, I was devastated thinking it's all over. And now I'm just thinking in this moment, he's washing the window for me. And I'm like, I might as well ask for more at this point.
Yeah,
it's going so well already. So I start collaborating with the captain. And I said, okay, look, I have been envisioning this for so many years. I really want to make it look like we're in space because the moon shadow isn't just going to be beneath us on the Earth's surface. The moon shadow is also going to be above us. Yeah. We're going to be sandwiched in because it's going to be blocking the Earth's atmosphere. We're going to be able to see through the Earth's atmosphere in the middle of the daytime from Earth. And the only way I can do this, shooting through this little 8-inch window, is I need to do what's called a photographic mosaic, kind of like a panoramic, right? Yeah. But like many, many rows and columns of photos. Is there any way you could maybe turn the plane around in the moon shadow?
So you're asking him to change his course?
I'm literally, yes. And I know how ridiculous
John,
that is.
You're a pilot, John. You know what flight plans are, don't you?
Exactly. And so I apologized to him right there. I said, I know this is so absurd to even ask. And he said, yes, it is absurd. I would literally have to get approval by the FAA to do this. And let's just say, don't get your hopes up. But considering this is such a historic day, everybody's so excited. We got some executives on board. I will ask them. And by the way, I found out later because he and I became friends later. He wasn't even supposed to be the pilot on this flight. The pilot called in sick and he was just the fill-in. I mean, oh man, every little detail, if one thing would have changed, it's like the domino effect. If you take one little tile, if you remove one tile, it doesn't work. So the pilot, we climb up, we go to 35,000 feet and we're about 5 or 10 minutes from totality, and the moon is getting closer and closer in. The sun is now looking like it's a crescent moon. And, everybody's kind of getting excited. The sky is getting a little bit darker. It was very cool. All of a sudden, the pilot, his name's Jeffrey Jackson, by the way, Captain Jackson. He says, he comes on to the PA system. He's like, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we're about 5 minutes away from totality. I'm going to do what's called an S-turn maneuver. And I'm like, he's going to do it. He's going to do it. Oh my God, he's going to do it. Yeah. He's like, I'm going to give you all a heads up, to show you ahead of time, what to expect. And I'm going to do the same thing once we're in totality. So he banks the plane to the left and to the right. And I'm sweating and shaking, and I have 3 cameras here and I'm just trying to get all my settings right. I'm doing 7 to 9 bracketed exposures for each image. I spent a lot of money on the fastest memory cards possible, and my goal was just to get all the data in, right? So I'm trying to get all these practice shots in, and I immediately realize he's not turning the plane wide enough. I'm not getting enough of the Earth in. And also the eclipse is too high up and it's getting warped from all the layers of plastic in the airplane window. You know, I have to shoot straight out the window. I can't angle it. Otherwise it gets all messed up. Obviously it's out of my hands now. There's nothing I can do, right? So all of a sudden the flight attendants, there's 2 flight attendants sitting right in front of me in the jump seat, you know, facing me because I'm in the front row. They get a call from the captain and she says, John, the captain wants to know, how was that turn? I was like, are you kidding me? This literally is my own private chartered jet now. I said, well, I mean, since he's asking, it wasn't good enough. He said it's not good enough. He needs a steeper turn and blah, blah, blah. And so he gets on the fly, no pun intended, he gets approval by the FAA and he climbs up another 4,000 feet to 39,000 feet. And he ends up turning the plane around 5 different times while the moon's shadow is passing over us. And we actually had the longest totality of anybody in the country because we're flying 500 miles per hour with the moon's shadow.
With it.
Yeah. So I actually got a little extra time. And I am just utilizing everything I've ever learned in my photography career in these 2.5 to 3 minutes. And so we're on one of the last turns and I still haven't gotten a good enough shot of the eclipse itself, which is kind of an important puzzle piece of the whole puzzle, right?
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, this is one of the details that I normally don't share, but so special to me. One of the flight attendants, they're both looking through their door window.
The small window, the really small one. Yeah.
The small one on the door, I think it's the cross check or whatever.
That's it.
So that on this particular plane, that's angled up higher than the passenger windows and it curves up a little bit. So it's actually angled up higher. Yeah. Also, there's no layers of plastic in that window. All of a sudden they say, oh my gosh, John, the eclipse is right in the center of our window here. Come here. I get up and I look through this little cross-check window, which is not very large. It's like the size of my telephoto lens. Yeah. I look at the eclipse, and this is my first time seeing a total solar eclipse with my naked eye. Yeah. The whole time before this, I was obsessing in my camera, right? And all of a sudden I see it with my own naked eye, and it was perfectly centered in this window. I literally almost forgot to take the photo because I was truly awestruck. Yeah. I mean, it was, in all sense of the word, awesome.
We were allowed that.
Yes, I can use the word awesome for that. It was truly awesome. And I'm like, I got to take a photo, obviously. So I go, I take my 7 bracketed shots. And it literally, as soon as I take the photo, the eclipse is over. I didn't realize until later, I got the diamond ring moment, which is the last sliver of sunlight shining through the canyon walls of the moon's surface. And it looks like a diamond ring because the whole eclipse is still there. It's solid, but there's like one little bright spot illuminating through the moon's canyons. And I caught that. And as soon as I took that photo, it was the last photo I took, the plane levels off, the eclipse is out of view, and all of a sudden it's broad daylight. And everybody's applauding. You know, I get back to my seat and I'm just shaking. I'm looking at all of my shots on all 3 cameras. I'm zooming in and out, making sure I have all the sharpness and exposures right. And I'm just piecing it all together. Yeah. And do I have all the data is all I cared about. And I'm piecing it all together and I'm like, oh my God, I got it. I got it. I don't know how the hell I'm going to put this all together, but I got it. And I lean back and I'm like, I'll have a solar flare, please. And I finally drink and relax for the rest of the flight. But I ended up spending an entire year putting together all these images. And it was right here in my apartment.
It's amazing. It's a truly incredible picture.
Thank you.
Somebody called this picture the ladder to space, didn't they?
Oh, Carter Emmert. Oh, he is such a wonderful human. Yes, he is the director of astrovisualization at the American Museum of Natural History here in New York City at the Hayden Planetarium. So, he works right under Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I was working with him quite a bit because the whole year I'm working on this image, I'm thinking, what do I do with this? Yeah. I'm not a very good business person. I'm a terrible businessman. I like to work on creative stuff, and I'm like, okay, I know I have something here and I want to protect it. I want to, how do I launch this? So anyway, through this crazy serendipitous event, a series of events that took place, I ended up meeting the director of the planetarium. And he and I immediately hit it off, and he called it the ladder to space. He said, in many ways, this is better than images we take from space, which is ridiculous to even say, let alone hear. But he made a good point. He said, this is at cruising altitude on a commercial airliner. We've all been at this altitude.
Yeah.
So you can appreciate the detail of the Earth's surface and relate to it, because this is us, this is where we are. But you can see how close we are to space. We're already in space. We're on spaceship Earth, right? He went on saying, it really illustrates the fragility of our planet and the atmosphere and, the thin blue line and things like that.
There must have been a very emotional moment, the moment you thought, that's it, it's done.
Yeah. I still to this day can't believe it, this actually ended up re-inspiring my own career, because prior to this eclipse photo, I was, in my mind, I was done with photography. And so this was like one of the first times in several years, maybe 2 years, in like 2 years that I even picked up my camera to work on a project, So the only reason why I had to do this photo is because I had been visualizing it my whole life since I was 12. So it's very rare in photography, as anybody would understand listening, to actually have an image in your mind
For that
of a photograph that you want to accomplish, and it not just to turn out the way that you envision, but even better than you envision,
And my thanks to the extraordinary John Carmichael. And as I say, he'll be returning soon, very soon, to talk about mental health and photography, plus how against all odds, and this is another wonderful story, how he's now being mentored by the biggest private collector of photography, Sir Elton John, no less. If you want another happenstance story, there it is. Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. Thank you, John Lennon. I think the Elton story, that fits into that quote absolutely perfectly. And that's it for another week of photo walking. Make sure you get your stories and your pictures in. Send them to studio@photographydaily.show. Studio@photographydaily.show. I haven't made so many pictures with you today. I am aware of that. I have been making a few extra pictures in between the rain dousing me and dousing the microphone. I'm not quite sure how many I'm going to put up today. But that's why I need your stories and your pictures. So studio@photographydaily.show. Studio@photographydaily.show. 2,000 pics wide on the long side, or rather 2,000 pixels on the long side. And of course, you don't have to send pictures in. We get so many letters too that are simply recounting stories of what you've been up to, any projects that you're working on, any thoughts, anything that's been triggered that you hear in the show where you think, oh, hang on a moment, Neil. Grassington United being a prime example of that. Or quotes. You know I'm a sucker for a good quote. Make it a photographic one, even better. Actually, while I remember, I didn't even note this down. Merch. Yes, merch. Now, we're not the kind of outfit that has merch, really. What do you think you are, Neil? One of those YouTube channels? No. But we did have, I did organise some merch. They were hot, cold drinks flasks. So you can put hot or cold in them. You know what I mean. 2 cups worth of coffee. And they are Photography Daily ones. Yes, they are original, one of a kind, Photography Daily ones. Now, everybody that came on the retreat, they got one. They have one. But I thought, because I had to order a few actually to enable me to get to the minimum order. So it was very important that those that came on the retreat, they got the first. They got the first. For very good reason, but there are still the flasks available, and so I'm going to issue these internationally. Yes, I'll do it internationally. I'll have to start saving up. All the letters received are special, but some arrived that literally hit you for 6. They knock you for 6, don't they? And you think, wow, what a story, what a photographer. Stories like Neil's arm links, of course. Stories like Madison Thorne a few weeks ago. So the hot and cold photography daily flask takes some winning, but if you have a story which makes me sit up and take note, it doesn't have to be extraordinarily personal. It can be something where you think, wow. I mean, the Grassington United one would have been pretty close to a flask-worthy letter, actually. Dominic, don't get your hopes up. It's from this moment onwards. Oh, Neil, that is teasing. Oh, I do apologise. So yes, we got the flask. I'm glad I remembered that. I want to close by saying a very special hello to one of the photo walkers on the retreat last week on the Isle of Wight, to our good friend Paul Hudson. I know it's been one of those weeks, so I just wanted to send a big hearty red Leica dot to you. If Leica did hearts, Paul, we'd be sending you one of those. And a play-out song. Well, I have to do something that pays homage to the moon, surely. And I've chosen this from a group called Space Doves. Something just to make your last few photos of the walk today by. It's Space Doves and Moon, where it apparently never rains.
I'm flying to the moon with you tonight. I'm flying back home with you tonight. And it's so far away, and it's so long, and it's so far away. I'm flying to the moon. Inside us is the cure and the remedy. Love is the cure and the remedy. And it's so far away, and it's so long, and it's so far away. I'm flying to the moon.
Space Doves and Moon. And that's it for this week. My thanks to John Carmichael, Dennis Skyam, Jim Mortram and Nils Armelinks, and those who are patrons, which you can join through the link on the website, photographydaily.show. And for those wonderful supporters who are, on tomorrow's More show, Pictures on a Page deals with the Book of Clouds, which, given the storms in the UK, is apposite, if not a little scary. There's the second of our 2 round table conversations recorded on the Photowalk retreat. This time it's about social media and how we use it. what I've learned about comedy, and a conversation with a legend I will not forget. Plus, 5 things I love about photography comes from the landscape photographer and, well, YouTuber, because he is, Mally Davis. Next week, a special show, which once again will be testing my nerve as I upload from a remote location. You'll have to wait and see where it is, though. It may surprise you. And, I have a special guest, Joel Meyerowitz, the first of a couple of appearances on the show, one of which, I'm holding back for a couple of weeks due to a sort of embargo, but in the first part, which is next week, we talk about him, his life, his start, his pictures, his philosophy.
Because that's all photography is. It's a sensibility that you feel about where you are or things you see. And you react within your sensibility by saying, ooh, and you raise the camera and you make a photograph of the thing that called out to your sensibility. And by doing this again and again, you define yourself, or you identify who you are to yourself. And that's the story of photography.
That's Joel Meyerowitz next week on the show. Music is from the incredible artlist.io, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you, and talking with you next time.
Cool, car. Back to earth with a bump. Yeah, raining. I bet you're glad you bought the world's most expensive Wellington boots. I didn't really wear them much on the retreat last week, but they are rather nice. Did you know they were actually invented by the first Duke of Wellington? I did know that, car, yes, I did. I'm wondering how you knew that, though. I asked Siri on Apple Car What's It. Oh, you're not just a pretty bonnet. Well, thank God they weren't invented by the Duke of Piddle or something. Can you imagine that? Anyone see my piddles? Where's my piddle? Sounds like a cat. Duke of Piddle? Yep, Piddle actually exists. Drove through it once. True story. Do you think there's a Piddle United? I've no idea, Carl, but after my gaff with Grassington, anything could happen. Mind you, I certainly wouldn't be sampling Piddle United's halftime coffee. Should we get home and dry out?
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.